Hello, how are we doing? Welcome everyone. This is Ian, aka Tiger Mendoza. I hope you're doing well. Um, Thank you very much for joining in. This is the first time I've done one of these. Um, if you are expecting some banging tunes and a DJ set, there will be tunes. There will definitely be tunes, but it won't be one of my DJ sets. Maybe I'll do one of those another time. In fact, I definitely will do one of those another time. Shout out to the boy who chose the sea. How you doing? This will be a breakdown of a remix I did. I will show you my template, how I work in Ableton, and we'll see how we go from there. Really, it's a track I like. So why did I choose this track to start off with? I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with it, how it turned out, and I am really happy with. Well, played it to the band and they really liked it, which always helps. Um, so yeah, I thought I'd start with this one. I know it's a bit strange to start with a remix. I've got another track I'm thinking of doing next week, um, which I've got lined up. Probably going to be a breakdown of Oppressor and TM Skate, which I'm really looking forward to doing. It's one of my favourite tracks on the album. They're all my favourite tracks on the album. And I've got a couple of other ideas for following weeks. But if you've got any ideas, my plan is to do one a week for the next 4 or 5 weeks. So if you've got any ideas, anything you would like me, obviously Tiger Mendoza tracks. I'm not going to break down like Jay-Z tracks or anything like that because I'm not Jay-Z. But yeah, any Tiger Mendoza tracks you want to see me break down or have a look at, let me know. Let me know in the comments or hit me up on Instagram, on Twitter, um, or just let me know basically, and I'll see what I can do in coming weeks. Probably should also be fairly obvious. I have never done one of these before. I've DJed a bit online, and shout out to all the Isolation Wave crew. But this is the first time I've broken a track down live, so this could get interesting. But it should be alright. We're all learning together, right? Cool. Okay. So with that, let's get into the track, shall we? Oh, or I could do a little bit of background on the track first. Who are the Deadbeat Apostles if I change over to this one? Oh, and also, I should say, if you have, hopefully you guys can hear okay. If you can't hear, if you could give me, there's people I think watching in the comment box. If you could give me a thumbs up if you can hear properly, or a thumbs down, or just say yes or no if you can hear properly, that would be great. Um, anyway, I'm going to keep talking because looks like it's coming through. Maybe a slightly odd setup. Looks like it's a slightly odd setup. I've actually got my audio coming out the speakers here rather than the headphones, so that's why I'm not actually wearing headphones. Anyway, I'll stop blathering. So this was a remix I did for the Deadbeat Apostles. Um, should say thank you very much to them to let me do this. And here is a picture. Sorry, slight audio hitch there. Um, so, shout out to DFF and to Leon. How you doing, guys? So, that was the Deadbeat Apostles. I'm going to try this again, and we'll try and get a picture up of them, and we'll try and get it so I can talk over it as well. Bear with me. I'm still learning OBS, you see, and there's a bit of a lag, so hopefully that shouldn't happen too much. But we do this one, and I'll do that. Oh, you don't want to work. Alright, never mind. The Deadbeat Apostles, that picture of them you saw was of them. And you should see it. The audio will be back soon. I'm going to type in here. So hopefully that's coming through now. So yeah, anyway, that was the band, and that they're good mates. We've done a few gigs together. We played together quite a lot around Oxford. Um, you guys may know that I got Mike to sing on a couple of songs actually through Sinister Sound Gallery, and shout out to Jake. So we have been working on little bits and pieces here and there. Um, this track, so my recollection of how this remix came to be, we were a due to do a gig together, and they were launching this new single. They asked if I wanted to play the launch gig, and it was one of those things that I said on Twitter as almost a kind of a joke. Well, if you need a remix, because I think they said something on Instagram in a post like, "Yeah, we're reading a Prodigy remix," as a kind of joke themselves. And I said, "Well, no, guys, if you actually want a remix, let me know." So I got in touch, and I think like a week or so later, Shell or one of the guys from the band sent me a message saying, "So, Tiger, if we did want a remix, how would we go about doing that?" So I said, "Send me the stems, and I'll see what I can do." So they sent me the stems, and it's a cool track, and I did my thing with it. So before we go any further, what I'm going to try and do now, if this will work, is play you a bit of the original song. So if I do this. So, go back to that one. Hopefully, you guys have heard the song. That's great. Um, that's really weird that the audio wasn't coming through. Sorry about that, guys. Like I say, I'm still learning some of this stuff. Um, so so that was the original song. It's kind of a cool, kind of jazzy country song. So I heard that and thought, well, what am I going to do with this? And my view was really to kind of, I wanted to speed it up. I wanted to give it a bit more energy, if you like. Um, and yeah, I wanted to basically make it like a Tiger Mendoza song, right? So I I will show you how I did that now. So if I get rid of this window and the joys of doing this all live, I will show you this one. Okay, now this is the session, and I'll break it down into pieces in a bit, and we'll go through all the individual sections. But this is it's a slightly different version because I'm going to tweak stuff, and I didn't want to change the original. But this is effectively the exact same session, the final thing that I sent to the guys when I submitted the remix. So I normally start with my main template. So I will just show you a quick picture of that. So this is my main template. And it's pretty straightforward, but this is pretty much all my tracks, whether they're remixes or originals, they pretty much all start with this this track, this layout. So at the top of it, I have my drums, and I'll show you how I process my drums a little bit in a bit. I then go into the bass. I just have two channels to start off with for different pads, and a separate one for leads. Now, and I can duplicate these if I want to add more pads, strings, etc., etc. What I'll just do is I'll click on one and just duplicate it out, so I can add other string sections if you want. But I separate. Generally I'll have at least two kind of pad things, so maybe a kind of thinner pad and then a thicker one if I want to beef stuff up later on. And then I have a lead section for kind of leads and harps and that kind of thing. Again, I'll duplicate that when I want to have different types of leads, so different lead lines, or like I say, if you want a synth lead line and some kind of arpeggiated thing, I'll put them on separate channels. I have normally at least one audio channel there. That's for, it could be any kind of audio source. So these are all kind of synth things that I'll generate within Ableton. I have an audio just there for either vocals or guitars or some kind of live audio source. Just going back to the drum quickly, this loop thing, so normally I'll do the MIDI drums up here, and I normally by default have a channel for drum loops and that kind of thing. So I may kind of, you'll see it here because I've kind of used in when I go through the session for the remix. I've got one or a couple of sets of channels actually in this one for MIDI drums, and then another one for breaks and beats and loops that I can layer on top and fade in and out, that kind of stuff. So that's up there. So this one, like I say, is for guitars, and again, if I want to stack different types of guitars to different vocals, I'll duplicate that a lot. And then below that, what I normally do then is bus all of that, but I'll get all to that when I go into the main section. But that's where the bus channels are below. And then you've got the usual kind of sends and the master there. Should mention, I don't think I've mentioned this before, if I go back to the main template. So my main DAW of choice is Ableton Live 11. This track was originally done in 10. Functionally, there are a fair few changes, more behind the scenes stuff between 10 and 11. It broadly happens the same. I bought Ableton 10 Suite a little while back and have never looked back. It is what I've been using for years. I've been really happy using it. I really know my way around, so I'm not going to get into what's better, it's just what I use. So a lot of you can apply a lot of the similar principles to any DAW, I think, or any audio station. Particularly, I will show, obviously, within this how Ableton works and various tips and tricks I've learned for using Ableton for making remixes. But you can apply similar logic to Logic or Fruity Loops or any of that kind of stuff, I think. So, okay, let's get into the main session. Now, I've got a little list here on a notepad of stuff that I'm going to cover. As I'm going through, there is a live chat, as you guys have noticed. So if there's anything that's not clear, anything you want me to clarify, or anything you want me to go into in a bit more detail, please feel free to post it in the comments, and I'll keep an eye on the chat as best as I can, and we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try and keep this to about an hour. We should be okay to get through the track there. Maybe a bit less. We'll see how it goes from there. Should be enough time to go through this. So it should be fun. So let's dig in. So where did I start with this? Now I won't start with where I actually started, but I'll start with the drums, because most of the tracks you start with the drums, or at least I start with the drums. I always feel like when I'm making a new track, whether it's a remix or a new self-produced tracks, you get the drums right, everything else fits around it. I think I'm not a drummer by trade. I did have a few drum lessons when I was much younger, but it just kind of makes sense to me, right? You work with a decent drummer and everything just, even if you're in a live band, and that is, everything just kind of glues to that, and everything really helps. So let's start with the drums. Now it's kind of interesting for this one, because I did something I didn't normally do. So layering up kits isn't unusual at all, and again I do that quite a lot. What I did within this one is layer up within the same drum rack. So I should explain for Ableton newbies, this drum rack that you can see on screen here. I may not go into all the details of every single Ableton feature. There are tons of really good guides, and I can put some links below if it's of interest later on things like warping and Ableton racks and getting the most out of Ableton. I'll skim over that stuff fairly quickly while I'm going through this, but I will touch on some Ableton features, like I said, all the way through. So this here is a drum rack. Ooh, what have I done there? There we go. So this here is a drum rack, and what I've done here is actually processed to some kind of live drums. So actually Alex's what it took here was the drums that they gave me from the drum stem, and there is a slice to MIDI function built within Ableton, which I think I can demonstrate very quickly. So here is, hopefully this will come through, but this is what the original drum stem sounds like. Ooh, actually, if I just put in, gotta love it being live. So I'll drop this in here, and if I just solo this quickly, so this is the unwarped original drum stem that I had through from the guys, and I'll just play you a quick sample of this. And it's cool. Alex is a great drummer. Got a nice little swagger to it. Gearing up for the fill here. So anyway, that's the main drums I had. So here's the first kick, and this is where I kind of started chopping it. So if I do this really quickly, okay, and then if I click on warp, so you see here it marks the first beat in that on the drums, and I won't do it for the whole thing, or it's kind of similar to this process, but basically I want to make a 4-bar loop and then turn that and then slice it, so then I can, it may sound like a really weird thing, and I'll explain why I did it, but slice it into individual pieces so that I can process the drums individually. So I wanted to keep his groove, I wanted to keep that live playing feel, but I wanted to process the drums myself and make them sound more like a Tiger Mendoza track, basically, if that makes sense. So if I go back here, so there's the second beat, so I'll do this here, and if I just loop that one, so if I Control L, and that turns it into one big loop, we start getting, and I should say that the original session is much slower, but I've sped the track up to 125 BPM, and it will just loop like this all day if I let it. And then once you've got that loop, I should switch that to beats as well, because that's better for chopping up drums. So you see here the original BPM of the track is about 98, just under 99 BPM. So yeah, I sped this up quite a lot, to 125. Honestly, I was so worried when I submitted the track back to them, because I thought they'd think I was taking the mick. Turns out they loved it, so I'm really happy with that. And Alex actually has been a mate for a while. He sent me a message saying, "You've done it again, mate. I'm really glad." So I was so happy to hear that, because I was like, what if they hate it? Anyway, so once you've got it here, you can right click on your loop and go to slice to new MIDI track, and you get this kind of menu. won't worry too much about all these bits here, but slicer transient, I'm sure if you use Ableton before, you've probably done something similar. But I'll click on OK here, and it gives me a brand new MIDI track. And if I play, you'll see here a kind of MIDI representation of the same drums. So if I solo that, it won't be very loud, but listen up. Yeah, so you see that's the kind of MIDI version of what's above. And again, why I did that is really the timing, but then what you get here is the individual hits, so you get the kick, you get the snare and all that kind of stuff as separate playable slices. So if I double click on one of these, that is the original kick. So if I play that, hopefully hear that if your speakers are up high enough. The snare is probably on the 3, nope, 4, there we go. So, and it's all based on the transients within the algorithm there. That was sounding very technical. It wasn't meant to be technical. So that's what I did. So I split that. If I go back to, I'll delete that one because I don't need that anymore. Delete that one because I don't need that anymore. So that was part 1. So if I go back into here, the verse drums, that is what I did, and that's how I got all these slices here. I think I sliced I did it with a slightly longer section of the drums, which is why I've got more slices, but it's still the same principle. So my version of that, actually I won't go into that just yet. What I also did, I actually shouldn't have deleted it, but never mind, is did a drum to MIDI. So actually I'll put it in here again. So what you can also do in Ableton, go back into here, I'll do this mega quickly, solo this again, go back to here. So yeah, I told you I shouldn't have deleted it. That's a beat 1 again, and if I click on warp, and then if I drag this back, I don't know if I was a beat. It's this one. Sorry guys. We'll loop that. Okay. Now if we crop that, okay, it's a little bit off, but that'll do. Oop. Okay. Now what I kind of wanted was that pattern. I wanted Alex's kind of groove, if you like. But again, I wanted to control it. But I wanted that kind of more naturalistic playing, because he's a drummer, I'm not a drummer, and I wanted to kind of keep that whole vibe of the song. But like I say, just kind of speed it up and kind of beef it up a little bit. So the way I did that, and the way you do it with all of this stuff. So if I create a new MIDI channel, it's here, and then you just drag. If I just take this, make this smaller again. So if I drag that audio of the drums onto the MIDI channel now, it should ask me what I want to do with it. And I click on drums here, and you can see here that it makes me a little a drum pattern of in MIDI notes of that loop. And again, the timing was a bit off because I did it very quickly and a bit roughly. But you see here the kicks are there, the snares are there, but it's matching that pattern. So this is what Alex has played in MIDI form, which is fantastic. So that, if I come back up to here, is how I got this. And again, to give me a bit even more control, if I get rid of these two, I definitely don't need them now. So this is now the slices, you can see them down the left here. And you can see that it's basically, it's not the most complicated drum pattern in the world, but again, I wanted to get that timing, and it's just easier for me to copy his timing. And you can see here, the snares are just slightly early. Every time, I don't know about you guys, whenever I try and produce a track, and I try and type it in, or even just, draw the notes in, it ends up sounding a bit mechanical, and I want the drums to sound as mostly as live as possible, especially in the kind of breaksy things like this. So I've got you get a slight swing here, so let me just show you the kick and the snare here on my version. And I should say these are MIDI notes, and they go into the drum rack here. So there's no actual drum racks individually on these channels, but that you see here goes to my kick goes here channel, which is set to in, and then my drum rack, which is stacked, so just this one, which I'll play first of all, is here. So the kick and snare sound like this. Right? So much more explosive, much more compressed, much more kind of Tiger Mendoza, to be honest. And what I did as well, so I wanted a bit more control over the hi-hats, so I think in this one, let me just check. Yeah, I just took Alex's original hi-hats and I processed them separately. So you see here, and again, this is all part of my kind of default template. I have the kicks, and sometimes I do kicks and snares on different channels, depending on how much control over of them I want. Sometimes I just put in a kick and snare on one MIDI channel there, and then the hats are always on a different one. So the hats sound like this. It's yeah, the kind of slightly clicky hat with all that kind of compression and other stuff, and I'll go into the main hat in a bit. And then actually I programmed in my own crash, because there weren't any kind of big crashes and I wanted one myself, so you've got a crash in here as well, which everybody knows what a crash sounds like. Nice crash. So all together, if I play that, and it's still the verse drums, or still the kind of chopped sample I've got, it sounds like this. Okay? And the other track I've got running in parallel here is an 808 kit. Well, actually, no, it's not quite an 808 kit. I'll tell a lie. What I normally have here as a kind of default is an 808 kit, which is part of the Ableton stock sounds. And the reason for doing that is it actually as a the 808 sounds I love and I use a lot anyway, but actually the way the kit's formed, it's already got a compressor and that kind of stuff within the kit, so I can just drag in a sample. Like if I want to use a different drum sample on here, then I'll just drag in a different drum sample, and it's already got a compressor and that kind of thing rigged up with all the different macros and stuff, so I don't have to do too much tweaking or create my own drum racks. But again, what I did for this one is layer on Alex's original drum sound, again quite processed, and I wanted to give it a bit more body, again just a little bit of something more kind of, I suppose, artificial and synthetic, to again beef up those drums and really hit them, ring through. So, and you can't necessarily hear it. You wouldn't necessarily call out, oh, that's a electronic sound or from a different pack, but this is what the kind of parallel running kit sounds like. It sounds alright, is that right? And I tried that. I tried extracting the groove from Alex's drums and then trying to create my own rack. But I couldn't get a sound. I couldn't get that kind of live drummer in a room sound I wanted for this track. So that's why I ended up layering the two together. So you mix the two together, and you see I brought this one down, and this is kind of in the background. And then if I go the main audio processing on the live drums, a bit of EQing, bit of EQ here just to take away the subs, which I normally do on all of my tracks. So just kind of shaving off the lower 30 hertz there, and then a glue compressor just over the whole thing, just really acting as a limiter, just to kind of take away the peaks, because when you've got both drum kits together, it can get quite loud. And when things get loud, is good generally. But when things get too loud, it can get a bit messy and it becomes a bit difficult to control. So I've just got a glue compressor here with soft clip switched on, and you'll see that light probably come up every now and again, just when it gets a bit crazy and when things like the snare, which is really loud, and this starts hitting. So the drums now sound like this. Okay, so that is what so that's the drums, and like I say, that to me is the backbone of most of this track. Let's have a look for a couple of other bits. I mean, there's a couple of other things which I probably won't go into here. So I programmed in a couple of drum fills like that. That wasn't Alex, that was me kind of just putting in kind of some fills and other stuff. There is another drum loop I put in on the first verse, which I just found somewhere. This is from a free drum pack, so that's in the mix as well. Just kind of shaved off the EQ in here so it kind of matched the rest of the drums, but that sounds like this. And that's the audio for that one. One of the things I like doing, so it's on beats here, so it kind of plays through each little piece of the drums. And you can see here the original tempo of this loop is 174, so I've slowed it right down to 125. So if I play, so normally by default it will warp something like this, and you get those kind of artifacts coming through. And I didn't want that, so I just wanted it to clip. And it's just about the sound I wanted. I wanted a slightly different sound when it went into the verses, which is what I used that for. So I brought it down to about here, I think. And you get this transition from the big drums to the clip drums. Ooh, take off solo. Actually, let me just play the drums. We'll get to the rest in a bit. So if I go from here. Drops the track down, and then that kind of slightly more clipped drum sample comes through there. Something I should mention, so all of the drums that I've got here, so I've got this, we've got this loop here, I think that's all the drums in this one, yep. So they are all, and you can see here, their outputs. So that goes to my beat bus, which is this here. And again, just a bit more compression. Yeah, so this is where the heavier compression comes in here, and really kind of, I like compressed drums, I'm not going to lie. I know people are like, oh, you can't compress the drums so much. I don't care. It worked on this track. It works on a lot of my tracks. Didn't use Ableton's drum bus in this one, which I love, but it didn't really need it in this one. So again, this is just a glue compressor, which is great as well for drums, for slightly more natural sounding drums, with that limiter on. Just to stop things getting too crazy, and then a limiter anyway, just for good measure more than anything else. So I've realised I've spent quite a long time talking about just the drums. I really like playing with the drums. To me, like I say, they're so key in pretty much everything I do. There is another drum sample in there, but I'm not going to go into that now. Okay, that's drums. Where should we go to next? Next bit, let's cover the keyboards. So, it was funny, so when I was kind of walking through this, and I'll put, after the video, when it's all kind of wrapped up, what I'll try and do is add chapter marks, so if you want to come back to different points in here, you can jump to the keyboard bit, or the drum bit, or whatever. Anyway, so, my in for this track was a keyboard loop. And really, apologies for this, not sure who the keyboard player is in the Deadbeat Apostles. He's very good, but I was kind of playing around with the stems again that they sent me, and they were really well produced. I've got to say, really appreciative of the stems. And whenever I've done a whole bunch of remixes, and you get them in different forms, and sometimes you got to go, what do I do with that? Sometimes you go, this is great. This is definitely in latter. It was obviously really nicely recorded and well thought through. So just a note: if you're going to send stems remixes, make sure they're clear, nicely labelled. Always helps. This is good. This works really well for me. So let me play you. I'll play you the original keyboard loop, and then I'll try and demonstrate what I did with it. So just going to make a quick chain here, a quick audio thing here. So all the keys I got, and sometimes depending on the track and the complexity of the track, you can get multiple key tracks. But for this particular session, I got all the keys on in one stem. So if I solo this, here's what the original key sounded like. Nice kind of Fender Rhodesy kind of sound to that. No idea what instrument they used originally, but lovely sound. So that's what it sounded like originally. I'm not going to delete it this time because I may need it again. And from that, I made a couple of loops actually, and then stacked them on top of each other. So I think this is the first one I made. So what I did is I took a chunk of that in a kind of similar-ish way to the drums and put it into Ableton Simpler. Simpler is great, and it's a very powerful tool despite its name. So effectively it's a sampler. But what it also allows you to do is chop the sample up within the sampler into smaller pieces. So what do I mean by that? So if you remember the keyboard sample I had before, I can play this. I hope. Yep. Oh, get down to here, and you'll see here that it just plays that first little bit. So I spent quite a while with this, just kind of lining up or dropping the sample into Simpler, and then kind of basically at every chord change I'd put a marker here, and then was kind of just playing with the audio and different kind of notes here until I found a bit of a groove. And I could have gone so many different ways with this, but there's something about this note here I think that kind of really struck with me, and I kind of found this groove which ended up like this. Just three notes, three kind of chord progressions anyway. And that kind of set the tone. I did this before I even did the drums really. Once I got that was my in, that was my way of producing the rest of the track. And so that's the main audio I've got there, with high pass on it, a bit of drive just to give it a bit of grit. And then I've used, let me see if this pops up, this VST called Replica from Native Instruments, which I love. Really cool, kind of slightly psychedelic sounding delays. I got it as a freebie a while back. I think you have to pay for it now though, unfortunately. But well worth getting if you can find it cheap, or well worth getting in general really. And it's got different delay modes in here, but it's the delay coupled with that phaser gives me that slightly, it's a kind of 2-in-1, so you've got that delay there, which I think always works really well with the Rhodes, and then you've got that phasery type sound just to give it a bit more, this kind of psychedelic, almost Chemical Brothers-y, kind of more vintage vibe to it. And then I've got CQ EQ after it, just to lift the highs a little bit and take out some of the mids, and that's how I ended up with this. Okay. So that was the kind of first thing, and you'll see I've kind of used that exact same riff at various points in the track um, as we go through. And then I did a similar thing up here, but warped it slightly differently. So what I call the kind of verse loop, it's more kind of straight. If you remember back to the bit of audio I just played you, this was kind of playing those chords from the intro, but in a kind of more. I wanted to change up the rhythm a little bit more compared to what they gave me. So this is what I ended up with. Just a 3 chord, really. And I'm not like Jay Dilla or something like that. This was just kind of me chopping it up within Simpler again. Slightly different warping, so you got that more stretched out warpy sound, for want of a better word. There's still a bit of EQ within Simpler, and then Ableton stock reverb on this one, just so it kind of, if you, I mean, I love using reverbs anyway. So if I do it without the reverb, it just didn't quite have the same vibe. But you'll see here, these are the actual MIDI notes I'm playing. So if I play this, and so between that and what I call the triplet riff, you get these two. And stacked both on top of each other. I didn't worry too much about EQing them because they kind of, one of them was slightly higher, and the other one was a slightly deeper loop, and they kind of just naturally seemed to fit together for me, so I didn't need to, especially I think with when I use this CQ just to kind of drive it a little bit more, the two keyboard loops seem to fit really nicely together. At least I thought they did. If I was a professional engineer, I probably would have done more EQing on them, but I'm not, and it worked for me, so there we go. So I'm going to take that out, and then they are both currently running into the lead channel. Yep, just want to double check that, which is this, pretty simple. So Ableton stock channel EQ with high pass enabled just to roll off those low frequencies, and then standard limiter and stuff on there as well in case things get too crazy. So you've got the main chords, you've got the MIDI notes there. Cool. What else did I put in here? I realised there's a third keyboard loop from using the similar principle here, which came much later, which I kind of completely forgot about until I looked at this session again. But again, same thing. So it's back in Simpler again, this time with a bit more delay. And this was really just at the end of the track to try and give it a bit more. I wanted an extra element, and you'll see in a bit, hopefully, if I get to it, when it comes back out of the kind of breakdown. But if I play it to you now. So a kind of sped up version of that kind of chorus chord sequence I was using. There we go, with a slightly tighter delay on it, and again that feeds into the leads. So those synths were kind of, once I got that, and it may sound weird to say, but once I got the drums and the synths in, that was it. That was me kind of, I've got something I can work with now. I've got something that can work for me, and I can base the rest of the track around. So where did I go next? That was a really great question. I can't remember exactly what I built on next, but I would imagine it would have been. Oh, I should mention as well, I did add a couple of my own pads in as well, because I wanted some more continuous chords. And doing those chops and stuff, you get nice stabs and things, but they don't necessarily work quite so well for longer synth passages. So these are really simple kind of synth lines that I put in myself on top. So this was a VST I found ages ago, called Roland, imitating some old Roland synthesizer. I have no idea how accurate it is, but I quite like it as a synth. So that's the synth with a bit of reverb on there just to give it a slightly longer tail. And then I've got this thing called Tremolator, which gives me, which is a really cool effect from Sound Toys again. I love Sound Toys effects, but that gives me that kind of the trem on it, the tremolo sound at the end. So if I take that off, take the reverb off, just kind of a fairly standard pad, add a bit more reverb on there, always nice. Tremolator then gives it a bit more life, really, and makes it sound a bit more interesting than just a basic pad, which is good with these kind of things. And then did a similar thing here for the other pads. So this was, I wanted a bit of a, I like the kind of soul country track it was. And organ is always a good thing in these tracks, so I added a bit more organ. So this is what the organ sounds like. And I think, I've looked around for ages for decent organ VSTs, and this is definitely one of the better ones. So I'd highly recommend this Hanon B70. Sounds like this. And this is all in the mix, so it's all kind of, it may not necessarily sound great on its own. It can sound really, really good. But in the mix, this sounded fine to me, and again, just to beef up everything else. So it's the organ, and then I normally, with organ, will put just a bit of a saturation on top of it as well, again, just to give that organ sound a bit more oomph, and a bit more clipped. So that all fits together. If I play the leads and the pads together, here, you should hear that come together, like this. So that's the two pads that I made together. And then if I go back to here, so this is actually the two pads and the original, or the doubled up synth chops that they gave me as well. And then back into those chops I made that I demoed earlier. And that's all the synth parts within this. So they're the keyboards. Never fun in this one. That's slightly different to the way I've worked, and when we get into maybe some of the other tracks in future weeks, yeah, you'll see that that's slightly different. But again, every kind of track is slightly different and needs a different element, so that's what I did for this one. So where should we go next? I'll do the bass next. Now I feel again a little bit bad about this. So for all of the, I wanted to use as much of the original stems as possible. So I used the original keyboard parts, used the original guitar version, the original drums, obviously vocals in here. I did not use the original bass, and again, apologies, I can't remember his name. He's a mighty fine bass player. Played with him a lot of times. Lovely bloke too. But the bass groove from the original track, it didn't quite work for me, so I came up with my own. So I used, and this was again was slightly new. I thought I'd try something a bit different on this one. So I used Reactor Player bassline, and I think this one's free. It's called Block Space, and it's cool for kind of mono bassy type stuff, almost kind of more realistic sounding 303 type stuff. This was the bassline I created to go with the track. I think mostly this was actually a preset, but I kind of tweaked bits like that kind of. I wanted to have a kind of slightly elastic sound. I wanted to kind of roll off the filter a bit, so I'd probably tweak that. But yeah, essentially that's. And the bass line really isn't that complicated in here. It's that kind of disco bass line, so just a kind of between the C sharp and the B. And I think again that was just from playing around, but I wanted to keep that driving the verses of the track. And then the choruses, same thing again. Long longer notes this time rather than shorter, stabbier ones for the chorus. Back into. And that's the bass line. There's actually a second bass line here for bits within the verses, which, let me just try and remember what I used here. Yeah, Reactor 6 again, I thought it was. I think a slightly tweaked version, different wave, but still the same. I wanted a slightly different bass sound for those verses, so it's here. I rolled off the bass a bit more on this one. I kind of wanted more of the highs. It may sound a bit weird now, but it made sense at the time, and that's what happens when you make some of these things. It's what makes sense at the time. Whether I do that again, I don't know, but anyway. So if I play this, it's a slightly longer note. It goes something like this. And then it goes back into the other bass line. That sound, I mean, it's not a unique sound by any means, but it reminds me of something. If it reminds you of something, let me know in the comments below. but yeah, that kind of synthy bass sound, it reminded me of something. So that's pretty much the bass sound, and I used that a couple of times throughout this. So that's the bass. Again, both of those go into my bass bass channel here. So I sidechain that to the drums. So whenever the kick comes in, that will take down just dip the bass sound a little bit, and then it's always a dirty word these days, but I love sausage fattener. It's great for bass and just beefing up bass lines and low bass. So I used it on this. So yeah, we can play the bass on its own. If I solo the bass channel, that was a bad example. Let's go from here. And then if I play that with the beats. So I didn't want to go over the top with sausage fattener on this one, but it's a little bit there, just kind of slightly wibbling, compared to, you don't want to make his face too angry. If you have no idea what I mean, you can do this. Make it really angry. No, it's around here somewhere. And if I play that with the drums, it sounds like this. So my EQing's pretty simple on that. It's but I wanted the big drums, keep the bass in the centre, so it's all nice and tight. So that's the bass and drums. We got bass, drums, keyboards. What time is it? Yeah, I did okay. So I will quickly go through the different guitar parts because they were fun too. So Gary, I do know, and again I wanted to use his original guitar. So this was the first bit I chopped up. So similar thing I did with the other ones. I found a loop and processed it. So these are the main guitars. These are the guitars I started with, and then I wanted a bit for the chorus as well, so I'll come on to that in a bit. So these are the guitars I used for the kind of bridge sections, and it's all from the same loop, it's just kind of chopped up. So this is panned slightly to the right. Let me play it to you first. And I made this loop out of it. And when I played that, so that kind of 199-ish BPM thing, when I sped it up to 25, made it sound disco, a bit like Nile Rodgers or something like that, which is really cool. So I took that and then reamped it a little bit, so I added, put it through Ableton stock amp simulation and cab simulation, ended up with that sound. I did that again, so one of the other pieces here, I got a different loop, put it through a different cab simulator, so it sounded like two different guitars. And this is the second loop I found. And then we put the two together here. Okay, the riser thing I'll come on to in a little bit. But both of those guitars together, and then we've got the going through a bit of chorus and a bit of delay. So if I switch those off very quickly, and I'll play this bit. So that's what they sounded like dry. Chorus just adds that kind of spacey 80s-ness, which is cool for this disco type thing, and then a bit of delay on top of that. I'll get to the rise. So that's the guitars, and then the guitar chops. So I wanted some guitar in the in the choruses, but the guitar pattern that Gary gave me didn't quite work. So what I ended up doing was creating this guitar riff myself from little bits of his playing. If I show you, and then again a bit of reamping through the amp, and the cab simulator sounds like this. So again, it was kind of, I probably could have done that slightly differently on using other tools, but that seemed to work for me. So that fits into the choruses here. If I take that off, you probably hear that in the background. So it may sound a bit weird on its own, but actually in the mix it seems to work, and it brings out the highs in the rest of the track. So that's the guitars. I think, yeah, that's pretty much all the different guitars here. At one point I was thinking I might play some extra guitar on it myself. I didn't need to. It didn't need it in the end. And then finally, the vocals. Now the vocals are a big part of this. Mike and Shell have both got amazing voices. And yeah, it's really cool. So because the stems were really good quality, I didn't need to do too much to produce them. And so I'll go through Mike's bits first because there's a bit more processing on there. So the whole thing starts with this loop I found within Mike's vocal, which goes something like this.
Well, I'm your man. Well, I'm your man. We're not a man like me. But not a man like me.
And that is a loop I found within that Mike's vocal stem through the soft tube saturator, set to neutral, just bumped up just slightly again, just to give it a bit of that edge, and then through Ableton's brilliant built-in echo, which is on so many of my tracks. It's just this great, you can use it as such a great dub echo in so many different situations. So the two together, and then just high pass that a little bit through EQ. So that was that, and I'll come back to Shell in a bit, and then this is kind of getting to more the main vocal treatment for the verses.
Flat broke, in need of a friend, and on my rope, my time is at an end. The higher you fly, further you fall. Across hot coals, I'm prepared to crawl. I'm prepared to crawl.
And then I've got this other echoey bit which I found from the same loop here, so I made that into a bit of a loop at the top here. And it just kind of fades out into craziness, which is always fun by automating the feedback. So if I actually just rewind on that bit a little bit, because that was good fun. So if I show you here, so this was the feedback control on the echo, and it starts at about 44, so it's kind of quite low feedback or low number of repeats, and by the time it gets to the end it's at 127, so it's kind of feeding back into itself and you get these crazy delays. So if I play that sample here, you'll see it kind of starts at pretty standard echo and then just goes a bit nuts.
I'm prepared to crawl. I'm prepared to crawl. I'm prepared to crawl. I'm prepared to crawl. I'm prepared to crawl.
Let's go back here. And you can see here that's going a bit nuts, been a bit crazy there, so it's hitting the limiter quite hard, so I've got the limiter on there just to kind of protect everything. And it eased off on the highs there, so the two together sound like you just heard, basically. But yeah, actually the vocal treatment, oh, I should mention on the main vocal here I used this Waves Kramer tape simulator, which is very cool. It's quite subtle in a way, but within this one, just to give it a bit more grit, and so I've got the flux here, which is what gives it that tape grit all the way up, so it really sounded like a broken old tape machine. He's got a soul voice, and the soul and grit just comes together. They're just natural bedfellows, I think. So we've got that all the way up, and then there's a bit of a slapback delay on there as well to kind of add that more vintage vibe to it. So this, just so you can hear the difference, is what it sounds like without it.
Flat broke, in need of a friend, and I'm a rope. My time is at an end. The higher you fly, further you fall. Across hot coals, I'm prepared to crawl. I'm prepared to crawl.
And that's just on that main vocal. And that's the same chain I used throughout, so on the verses and then in the chorus bits as well.
How could this happen to a man like me, playing by the rules so foolishly?
Okay, so where have we got left? We've got Shell. We can't forget Shell. So slightly differently to some of the other remixes I've got in here as well. So I processed. I didn't use the whole all of Shell's backing vocals, and I actually got to all the layering and stuff that she did in the studio, which sounded great. It was all supplied on one stem. That's just what was given to me. I'm happy to work with that. So if I solo this here, and I'll get rid of reverb, and I did some auto filtering here and a bit more saturation. I do like using saturation. So this is what it sounds like before all the effects and processing. Bump this up a little bit. So you can hear the panning with the different overdubs and everything that she did in the studio. That was all supplied on one track. That wasn't me. So if I re-enable the automations, but I'd actually have to keep that turned up a little bit. So yeah, first thing, bit of saturation on there. Waves, sibilance. I love this thing for taking off those kind of pss and all that kind of stuff. This is one of the best plugins I've found for treating that kind of thing. This is Ableton stock auto filter. I found for kind of filter sweeps and that kind of thing, it's one of the best and easiest ways of doing that within Ableton. So that if I show you here, I've automated the frequency sweep here as a low pass. So you get this kind of build-up effect, which I'll show you, and then a bit of reverb at the end. So you get something like this. You hear it a bit. So if I play Shell and mic together, they sound like this.
Well, I'm your man. Well, I'm your man. Another man like me. You're a man. Another man like me. You're a man. Another man like me. You're a man.
Okay, so that's pretty much the vocals there. Trying to remember how I did the. Well, here's the choruses. So pretty much the same thing here.
I'm a man. My word is my bond. I'm a man. I know right from wrong. I got my pride, and no one can take that away.
Great verse. I love that last note that he held. Chorus, sorry. Love that last note he held. He's got that soul voice, and I love making soul songs. I love soul songs, and that's what I wanted it to be. So almost at the end. Running a bit over, but it's okay. So I did mention this risery thing. So I think just before I started this remix, I got this plugin called Endless Smile, made by the same people who made Sausage Fattener, and it's a whole thing. It's just there as a one knob, very simple plugin for doing ridiculous EDM style rises. So the big kind of crescendo-y things, and then come crashing down. And I was playing around with it, and it just seemed like a fit. I wanted something that build in the breakdown section that'll build and build and build before coming crashing down before that end chorus, and this did the job in one VST without too much messing around very, very nicely. So what I did was all of the backing is routed to this one Endless Smile plugin. So you'll see here, so all of these audios go to the bus, so the Endless Smile goes to the master, and things like the vocals and the guitar and all that kind of stuff go to 44, which is this plugin. And then I've automated, if I show you here, you can see here, this is where the automation comes in on that fella Milad in the plugin. And the UI is great in this, so I'm just going to I'm going to solo this and I'll show you what I mean. You'll hear it and you'll see his face change, and it's a lovely thing to witness. You ready? Feel sorry for him when you bring it back down again, because now he feels so sad again. But there you go, that worked. It's a very silly plugin. It does its job very effectively. The last bit I will show is it's the little bits of audio that sit on top of it. So I wanted a couple of other bits of audio here, just to kind of where that was. So while that's happening, you've got some other, just while that's, I wanted that build to happen, but I wanted the Mike's voice still to kind of carry out over the top. So I've got this here. It should come through. And a little drum roll there. So you put that together and you get this. So you get the riser then, and then it layers up with a couple of edits as well. And yeah, that's how I got that to work. So that's pretty much it, which I hope you liked. I'm going to play through, so then it goes through the master. I use this thing called Inspector on most of my tracks just to kind of check the levels and stuff. I normally try and aim to get this to peak. So I bring the buses down, and I normally try and get this to peak at around -3, -4 to give me some headroom, and then mastering I do in a separate set. So I'm going to play this through once, and you can have a listen. If you want to buy the track, go check out, or I'll play you a chunk of it anyway. If you want to hear the whole thing, it's on Spotify and all that kind of stuff, or if you check out the link below, then you can buy it from the Deadbeat Apostles Bandcamp page. So I will just go from here. My word is my bond. I'm the man. I know right from wrong. I got my pride, and no one can take that away. Extra drum extra lead bit as well. I put in there as well. Just to add a bit more energy to that last section. Ooh, go on. There we go. What did I use here? Yeah, this is one of the built-in. Using a bit Ableton's own built-in analog instrument, instrument here with a gate effect on it. I got this kind of choppy lead sound at the end. And a bit of delay on there as well. Okay, that is it. That's the whole track in about an hour, 15 minutes ish. Slightly longer. Mental note for next time, if you do it next time, don't spend quite so long on the drums and then rush everything else. Anyway, hope you found that useful. I'd really love to know what you guys thought, what, if I do this next time, what you think could work better. But yeah, let me know on Instagram, in the comments below what you thought. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening, and yeah, have fun with your own productions and your own things. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.